Yeah, welcome to the
Good
Vanguard
morning.
podcast, man. You're running against Tom Cotton in his race for the Senate in Arkansas. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Dan Whitfield, and I'm the independent running for the United States Senate here in Arkansas. And we actually have a really unique race where there's no Democrat in a U.S. Senate race, which almost never happens. So, we're ready to make history here. We're going to get a lot of the Democratic votes, a lot of the independent votes, and even a lot of Republican votes. So it's going to be a very interesting race.
Could you just tell everybody a little bit about your platform? What are you going to bring to the state of Arkansas that's not being brought currently from Tom Cotton?
Yeah, sure. So number one, Tom Cotton doesn't work for Arkansans. He hasn't really helped his constituents at all. In 2014, he immediately took $8.5 million from the Koch brothers and has ever since been, supporting his special interest donors rather than us. We saw that especially with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, where he actually cut taxes for billionaires by $2 trillion, and they raised our income taxes in response to that. So some of the things that I really want to bring here to Arkansas, the most important thing that I support is Medicare for all. We know right away that the number one cause for bankruptcy here in America is medical debt. It's not a question, it is a fact. And the worst part about that, if it's, not the fact that that's terrible in the first place, is that 70% of the people who file bankruptcy for medical debt have medical insurance. They're going to work, they're paying their premiums, doing everything the right way, and then they get sick and they lose everything. So we need to make sure that we are not the only country in the world where our citizens are filing bankruptcy because of medical debt. Medicare for all, especially here in Arkansas, as a representative of Arkansas, we're the 49th richest state, which means there's only one state that's more poor than we are, which is Mississippi. So it's, things like this are really important to the constituents here in Arkansas. The average household income here is $40,000 a year. And at $40,000 income, you're going to be paying $440 a year to insure your entire family. $440 a year on average here in Arkansas. So it's very, very important. And, that's number one on my priorities.
Interesting.
I would say another really important thing is the environment and addressing climate change. Because my opponent, Tom Cotton, he is a climate denier. He takes money, over $1 million from the fossil fuel industry. He takes money from coal in particular and promotes clean coal. The stuff where, what was it Trump said? You take the coal and you wash it first before you burn it. So there's no such thing as clean coal. Sorry, a little bit of sarcasm. But, we've got to start taking climate change seriously because it is happening. It's a fact. And we are already seeing the effects of it all around the world, and especially here in Arkansas, where we're seeing giant storms, unseasonably storms. We're seeing big tornadoes, historic flooding almost every single year. And it's really something that's going to affect us here on the Mississippi River and the Arkansas River. So we have to really start paying attention to climate change and preparing for it. I would say my third most important thing on my policy, and I have a lot of stuff on my policy. I don't know if you've gone to replacetomcotton.com and looked at my issues tab, but I have a lot of different things I'm supporting. I've had people tell me that's not how you do it. You pick 2 or 3 things and you focus on those. But, Senator Bernie Sanders said it the best. That's an old way of campaigning. That's an old way of running the government. And what we need to do is look at all of the different issues and address them all. We can't afford just to, pick and choose 2 or 3 things and focus on those. But my number 3 thing would be the federal decriminalization of cannabis, including nationally expunging cannabis-related convictions. That is super important. There is absolutely no reason why a person in Arkansas could be serving life in prison or have, a felony offense following them for the rest of their lives while they're trying to get a good job, while someone in California or Colorado or Oregon or Washington or one of the other 30 states is doing the same thing. And, they could be making millions or billions of dollars wearing a business suit doing it. We just have to expunge these convictions. We have to allow Americans to return to society to better their lives and better, society for all of us. And I guess my important example for that here in Arkansas specifically would be we just approved a new private prison for LaSalle, $169 million for this prison to house 500 people. $169 million for 500 people. If we were just to expunge 500 cannabis convictions, we could save 169 million bucks. You know, that's a lot of money. That's not chump change, especially in one of the poorest states in America. So,
well, Dan, it sounds like you have a lot of serious substantive issues behind your campaign, and it seems like you really would be speaking more to the libertarian-esque or independent streak among Arkansas voters. You know, maybe wanting a more populist senator rather than Tom Cotton, who's despite loving to identify with the small government conservatives and everything, as you say, is not in favor of legalizing cannabis, and who also just recently wrote an extremely incendiary op-ed in the New York Times, basically calling for Donald Trump to sic the military on the citizens of this country. That
an overwhelming show of force and
an overwhelming show. Yeah, that definitely got his name in the news. You know, he made some headlines for that, and definitely probably raised the profile of this election, I would say, just because of how unacceptable those comments were. Have you seen any renewed attention on this race or on your candidacy as an alternative? Any renewed excitement to get this guy out of the Senate?
Absolutely. I mean, our Twitter following has pretty much doubled in the last week or so. Our donations have spiked. People are really starting to take interest. It's been really difficult because if you look at the media, you've been seeing a lot of Tom Cotton is running unopposed all over the place. So being able to get our campaign out there known has been difficult. And when this happened, I was able to reach a few key people like Andrew Yang, and just being able to reach out to these people has helped a lot, because when you get someone, who has, say, a lot of followers on Twitter, they start sharing your stuff, then people start to take notice, and, retweets are amazing. But yeah, we've gotten a lot of support. And, honestly, this is just the first time people are starting to nationally see how dangerous Tom Cotton really is. He's been a danger for a long time, and people haven't really noticed because he's been in the shadows. And examples of this would be like, let's see. So he's been tweeting about sending our troops to Iran for a long time. He's ever since he actually sent that letter, the treasonous letter to the government of Iran. I'm not sure if you had heard, but there was a letter that was written by Tom Cotton and signed by 46 other U.S. senators, and they sent it to the Iranian government. They basically said, we don't care what kind of deal you make with the United States president. We're not going to, what's the word I'm looking for? We're not going to honor it. So that right there violated the Logan Act. And ever since then, he's kind of, I hate to say it, but he's had a hard on towards Iran. And, he even promoted the assassination of their general and all these other things. So where Tom Cotton really becomes dangerous is Donald Trump pays attention to what he says. He's got Trump's ear. He can be, Tom Cotton can tweet about sending our troops over the border into Mexico one week, and the next week, Donald Trump's tweeting, maybe it's a good idea to send our troops into Mexico. And the same thing goes with China and the Insurrection Act and police, overwhelming show of police force and military force, all of these things. These are all suggestions that came from Tom Cotton that Donald Trump just starts, reiterating.
Yeah, so I want to take a moment and kind of hone in on that a little bit and talk about how the George Floyd protests and the protests for Breonna Taylor. And, it seems like every city across the country has their own case of an instance of horrible police brutality that took the lives of a person of color across our country. Could you talk about what your position on these national calls to defund the police, to radically reform our criminal justice in this country, and just highlight how it may differ from the op-ed that people read from Tom Cotton?
So I actually had released an op-ed kind of pertaining exactly to that. When Tom Cotton's op-ed was published by the New York Times, it was inflammatory, it was hateful, and it was completely uncalled for and should have never been published, and that's why their editor had to resign. Well, in response to that, I wrote my own op-ed on what I think is what the focus should be on, which is the systematic racism that's sown into our society. It goes even down, way deeper than just the blatant police brutality that we've been seeing, the racism we've been seeing in the streets, by citizens, such as with Trayvon Martin and Ahmaud Arbery and these other people, that are being murdered by citizens in the street, not just police officers. And it goes all the way back down into underfunding of, schools in predominantly minority neighborhoods. It goes down to unequal employment opportunities, unequal wage opportunities. And I mean, it's literally an entire issue that's shown into our society. And police brutality is super terrible. We need to address it, of course, but we have to address all of the different things at the same time. Otherwise, they're just going to keep building off of each other. We've got to just destroy that racism and that systematic foundation. But as far as defunding the police, I mean, of course, as I'm sure everyone's kind of read and talked about, is that's a terrible term for it. It's not about defunding the police. It's about rebuilding the criminal justice system from the ground up. We've got to, number one, demilitarize the police. There's no reason for a law enforcement officer to have a grenade launcher or to be driving around in a tank in our streets and things like that. It's just completely unnecessary and a waste of our tax dollars. I think some of the areas that we should focus on as far as the, reforming our police is we have to have community review panels. If internal investigations comes in or internal affairs and they start investigating a crime committed by a police officer or a law enforcement officer, we have to make sure that their judgment and what they determine the officer did and what the appropriate reprimand was, that the community agrees with it. Because we can't have the police policing the police if they aren't going to police themselves.
Do you think
so we've got to have...
Do you think that part of kind of expanding the resources that people have in their community to protect themselves does come from defunding the police? When you look at the wave of austerity that's been implemented over our country, particularly since the Reagan administration 40 years ago, we've seen budget cuts across all sectors of public utility aside from the police department. So I think to give people who are calling to defund the police a fair shake, a lot of what they're saying is we need to reduce the funding of police dramatically so that we can first rethink policing. How, in your mind, do you think we should redistribute a lot of the funds which are currently channeled into, like you said, those militaristic weapons of force?
Yeah. So like here at home for us in Little Rock, I believe our police fund this year is like $96 million. I mean, we are spending way more money on our law enforcement agencies than we are on education, which if we had better education, there'd be less crimes and then you wouldn't have to spend as much on police. I mean, it's a domino effect kind of thing. So, I'm just a regular hardworking dude. I don't have, eyes on the inside of where our budget's going, which I think is completely wrong. There should be 100% transparency, and we as taxpayers should be able to see where our money is being spent. We need to audit is the first step. We have to audit, see where our money is going, what it's being spent on, and where corruption is allowing for it to go into pockets. And we need to start trimming the fat. And I mean, that's my same stance on the military right now. We have such a huge military budget. I can't just say, well, we need to cut their budget. What we need to do is audit and figure out where our money is going and then make the appropriate cuts. And I think it's the same thing, like I said, with the police, with law enforcement. We should not be having to give them that much money to do what they do. I mean, personally, I think the police should be more like the fire department. If you have a problem, you call them and they show up. They shouldn't be revenue officers. They shouldn't just be making money for the state. I don't agree with speed traps, with entrapment, and things like that. But, community review panels, number one. Number two, we have to make sure we have higher educational requirements for our law enforcement officers. There are too many cops out there that don't know the law that they're supposed to be upholding. I've experienced that myself. I drive like a grandma. I rarely get pulled over or anything. The last time that pretty much the only time I've gotten a ticket, I was turning left onto a road. There were two lanes going each direction. There was a merging lane in the middle. So I turned into the merge lane, waited for traffic to pass, and merged into traffic. I got pulled over and he said, "You can't drive in that lane. That is a loading zone. You're not allowed to merge from that lane." So I took my ticket, signed it, and immediately looked in the driver's handbook, and it says, yes, that is a merging lane. You can drive in it for up to 250 feet, which I had just pulled into it and then merged over when it was safe. I didn't even drive 200 feet. So, I mean, the point is a lot of law enforcement officers don't know the law, and we have to make sure that people that are upholding and enforcing the law know it. I think that could be accomplished by having higher educational requirements. If someone goes and gets a law degree, then offer, if they serve on the force for 5 years, to pay off their student loans. It gives them some kind of incentive to go. And at the same time as raising the educational requirements, we have to raise how much we pay police officers, especially here in Arkansas. The average law enforcement salary here is $36,000 a year. So what type of people do you get that are willing to go to a job where they're going to, put their life on the line? They're going to risk their children growing up without a father, or, their wife getting widowed for $36,000 a year. I can go work at, McDonald's, work a little bit of overtime and make that much. So we have to, it's such an we have to rebuild the whole system, man. It's just not working the way it is.
Well, I'm glad that you're putting that out there, and that alternative ideas, because obviously your opponent is not. Something I wanted to talk to you also about is the experience of running as an independent. We've talked to a few candidates on the show running as Democrats. What's it like running from without
Very hard.
outside of the party infrastructure, kind of without the funding that comes along with the DCCC or those traditional arms of funding? How have you been raising money? And I'm assuming that you're corporate free.
So our campaign is 100% grassroots. I don't take money from political parties, political action committees, billionaires, corporations. It's all just funded by working class people like you and me. And I think that's very important, because how are you supposed to work for your constituents when you owe, so much to special interests? And, it's been really difficult running as an independent, because I've driven more than 10,000 miles around my state before COVID hit. I've gone to different political party meetings. I've gone to, Farm Bureau meetings. And the difference is if I go to, say, the Garland County Republican meeting, and I speak to the Republicans there, they listen to what I have to say, and then I move on. If a Republican had gone to the Garland County Republican meeting and said what they had to say, they would walk out of there with a $2,700 check. And the same thing goes for, if I went to the Sebastian County Democratic meeting and talked to them about my policy and stuff, and then I leave, and if a Democrat did it, they'd leave with a $2,700 check. So it's been very difficult, not having a party backing you with the funding. And honestly, this campaign, being an independent, I probably wouldn't have much of a chance to win if there was a Democrat in the race. But since there is no Democrat in the race, we have a really, really good chance to actually win, because a lot of the Democrats who would normally, say, be donating to their Democratic candidate are able to donate to us.
Was that a conscious decision not to run as a Democrat, or was it just out of necessity?
I'm an independent, man. I believe that a representative should answer to their constituents and not a political party. That's just very important to me, and what I feel the foundation of our government should be. We should be by the people, for the people, not put into office by a political party to serve the political party. Literally, the definition of a political party is to help candidates get elected to control the flow of government. That was the whole purpose of them. Our founding fathers did not even support political parties and did not want them, because it taints the value of our representative republic. Our representatives, if they don't represent us, we don't have a representative republic. We just have an oligarch. So that's the main reason that I'm running as an independent. I was actually a registered Republican for 12 years before Bernie Sanders had woken me up to the corruption in our government, until I actually became, I was ignorant about politics, until I started looking at where the money's coming from, who's taking the money, how they're voting in response to where the money's coming from. And I started to realize it's a big corrupt mess, man. Yeah. When you have I made a post on Twitter earlier about the military industrial complex. Just since 1998, the military industrial complex has literally given our legislators $3.7 billion in bribes. That's crazy. That's why our military budget's $1 billion a year.
Yeah. And I think you could say the same for the policing. When it comes down to it, you got to follow the money, and that just explains so much of the mess we're in. And I think that's really important that you are not taking corporate money, because
and that's from unions too. That's the police union who is funneling money into legislators' pockets to get these huge budgets. I'm against congressional lobbying 100%. I think congressional lobbying should be outlawed. What we need to do is we need to figure out how we can have candidates' campaigns federally funded. That way, everyone has an equal playing ground, and you can, 86% of the time right now, the candidate with more money gets elected. And that's not a good thing. That's a terrible thing. Just a few years ago, it was actually 91%. So we're moving in the right direction, just very slowly and a lot slower than we need to. But we've got to make sure that our representatives are going to work for us, that they're held accountable for going against what's best for us, like especially Medicare for all. If you look at a lot of the Democrats who are against Medicare for all, they're taking money from the health and pharma industry. Of course, they're Medicare for all. But we need to start putting people above profits. I think that's very, very important.
How has your personal kind of transformation in politics, you mentioned being, personally awoken by Bernie Sanders, and it's no secret that, you're representing a district that comes from a deep red state. Arkansas is a stronghold for Donald Trump. As I'm sure you're aware, he has a lot of supporters there. Has your background in being able to approach this from the, hey man, I thought like you did, or I used to see the world this way, but I realized like I had been cheated, I'd been like lied to. Has that been able to help you relate with voters, and do you think that that's been beneficial to your campaign? It's very change of pace from what we typically see from progressive candidates.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I think honestly, I can tell you stuff all day long, and I mean, you're going to choose to either believe it or not. So what I like to do is I like to tell people about two websites, votesmart.org, which you can enter any legislator's name in there and it'll tell you how they voted their entire career, yes or no, and why. And you can also go to opensecrets.org, which they just basically compile FEC filings so that it makes it easier to put in someone's name and see where their money's coming from. If you give someone those two pieces and let them put everything together themselves, then you don't have to try to convince them because they'll find it, they'll figure it out. Being an independent is a huge advantage here in Arkansas because, especially when I'd started gathering signatures for my ballot access, I'd be standing out in front of DMV talking to people. And, right away they'd be like, well, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Like, well, I'm an independent and I believe our representatives should answer to us. And instantly, I mean, that's the best icebreaker that there possibly could be, because then you can ask them what their concerns are and, what they want from their representatives, and you can instantly start having a relationship with them. So it does help. I mean, I do come from a really conservative family. I grew up in a conservative family, law enforcement, military, and I was very ignorant, man. I can't really think of a better way to put it. I didn't know any better. And those two websites right there were able to help me wake up and see the corruption. And that is one thing. I mean, Bernie and I don't agree on everything, but that is one thing I will always thank him for, is opening my eyes to that. And, the whole reason I decided to run is he'd given a speech and he said, I've started a movement and that's all I can do. And now it's up to the rest of you to continue that movement. And I felt like, that really hit home with me. And, it was my job to try to explain what I had just learned to as many people as possible. Now, when you say Arkansas is a deep red state, it's actually not as red as you may think. Tom Cotton replaced the Democrat. I mean, it's pretty much even Bozeman had replaced the Democrat. It wasn't really until the Koch brothers put in, over $8.5 million into our elections here where we became a red state. And I think there was just a poll out yesterday talking about how progressive voters now actually favor Biden over Trump here in Arkansas. So it's really this is a swing state now, and it is up for grabs. There are a lot of Republicans that are really fed up with Tom Cotton. And those Republicans that are fed up with Tom Cotton probably would never vote for a Democrat. Yeah. But they'll vote for me as an independent. And I am pro 2A. I do support gun rights. I do believe I support HR 8 at the same time. I believe in background checks. I believe that, you should, if I decide to sell you a firearm, it should be my responsibility and my legal liability to do a background check on you to make sure you're not a felon and that you can legally buy a gun. But that also helps a lot here in Arkansas because this is a very pro-gun state. Even all the Democrats who've been elected, not a single one of them has been, against the Second Amendment, or they've never been elected. They haven't won their race. So I think being a pro-gun 2A person or a pro-gun to a independent really helps get those votes that I really need.
Yeah, and I think that the corruption element too is just perfect. Like you said, it kind of breaking down those partisan lines and helping voters realize that, regardless of Democrat, Republican, it's the corporate money is really the evil that they need to be aware of and fighting against. And I think that, yeah, running as an independent and educating people about just that, as Bernie kind of woke you up to, is definitely key there. Is there anywhere people can go to support you, find out more about your platform?
Sure. So replacetomcotton.com. That's my website. It's pretty easy to remember. I have a lot of stuff on my website. If you want to get to know a little bit about me, I did write a short autobiography, just a little bit about where I'm from, how I grew up, and how I became to be who I am. You can also go on there, and there's an issues tab where you can see where I stand on a lot of different policies. I think I have more than like 20 different policy stances on there. Why I support those, all the way from lowering politicians' salary to ending congressional lobbying, all the way to requiring homeless shelters federally to have handicap access. There's all sorts of important issues we need to be talking about. Another thing you can do is you can go on the media tab, and every Wednesday night I do a live stream trivia with different topics, just to kind of give everyone a break from everything that's going on around the world. It's so crazy right now. My last trivia was actually why Tom Cotton is bad for America, so that's a really good one. And then the one before that was Harry Potter, and we're trying to figure out what to do for this Wednesday. Maybe we'll do Star Wars, I don't know. But, just fun trivia nights. Those are all on there. Every single Saturday night, I do a live stream update and Q&A. I have all of those on there. So there's more than 50 hours of live stream, so you can kind of watch, get to know me for who I am. I answer policy questions all the time throughout my live streams, so you can catch different things in there, as far as LGBTQ rights, to immigration, to tax. I talk a lot about taxes because I want to reform the way we do taxes, because we have to lower taxes for small businesses and the working class. At the same time, we have to start enforcing taxes on billionaires and corporations that avoid them right now. So I talk about a whole lot in those. So replacetomcotton.com is my website, and you can actually get a lot of information about my campaign from there. And I'm also the kind of candidate where you can always, all my contact information's on there. You can send me a text, give me a call, shoot me an email, a social media message. I always answer all my questions as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on today, Dan. We appreciate it talking to you, and we wish you the best of luck in your campaign.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate you having me. And if you ever have any questions, man, just never hesitate to reach out.
Thanks. We appreciate it.
We're looking forward to having you back on, hopefully.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I look forward to it. Thank you, guys. You have a good one, Gavin, Zach.
Take care, man.